McDonough Street, Brooklyn. July 1910, 11 o'clock at night. The thermometer in the front parlor of a brownstone between Tompkins and Throop reads 93 degrees. It has been over 90 degrees inside this building for 6 days. The coal stove in the basement kitchen has not been lit in a week. The family is eating cold food, bread and cheese and pickled herring, anything that can be carried down to the stoop. The windows on the parlor floor are propped open with sticks of broom handle. A cotton sheet hangs over the front door to keep flies out and let the night air in. A widow named Anna Reichert sits on the top step. She is 61 years old, born in a village outside Stuttgart in southern Germany. She has lived on this block since 1881, which means she has watched these brownstones for 29 summers, and she has sat on this exact stoop for 9 of them since her husband died and she moved up from the basement apartment to take over the parlor floor. It is the hottest night of the year. The whole block is outside. On the next stoop east, a Jewish family from Białystok, Poland, pronounced Białystok, has dragged kitchen chairs onto the stone. The father, a tailor named Mendel, holds a Yiddish newspaper in his lap and reads aloud, translating the European political news for an old man 2 stoops over who came from the same district 20 years earlier. On the next stoop west, an Irish family, the McCarthys, 3rd-generation Brooklyn-born, parents from County Mayo, have spread a wool blanket over the top landing. 2 children are already asleep on it head to foot. Their grandmother sits beside them, fanning the air with a folded newspaper. Across the street, 3 brownstones have their stoops fully occupied, 12 people on each easily, and the residents are mostly recent Italian arrivals from the area around Salerno. The conversation is in southern Italian dialect and English mixed in roughly equal parts, with the Italian carrying the news from home and the English carrying the news from work. This block, on this night, holds about 45 buildings, give or take. The reform investigators from the New York Tribune who walked these streets in summer 1910 estimated that something close to 400 adults and children were outside on the stoops on McDonough between Tompkins and Throop after 10 o'clock on the hottest nights. The interiors of these buildings, the parlors and bedrooms behind the open windows, were unlivable. The Tribune reporter used the word encampment. He was not exaggerating. The reason everybody on this block is outside in the dark is heat, and the reason heat sent them out is architecture. Brooklyn brownstones in 1910 are narrow, deep, and tall, 25 feet across the front, 60 feet from front door to backyard, 3 or 4 stories. The 1879 New York State Tenement House Act, which by 1910 had been amended into the more famous 1901 Act, had attempted to require windows in every room, but Brooklyn's brownstones built in the 1870s and 1880s before either law existed complied unevenly. The middle bedrooms on the parlor floor of Anna Reichert's building had no windows at all. The 2 upper bedrooms had windows that looked out onto an air shaft 18 inches wide. The shaft brought no breeze. It only carried heat from below up. The buildings, in summer, did exactly what they were designed to do in winter, held warmth. By 1910, 2 out of every 3 New Yorkers lived in tenements or in subdivided housing that public health investigators classified as functionally tenement. Brooklyn's brownstones were a step better than the Lower East Side dumbbells, but only a step. The middle-class Anglo families they had been built for in the 1880s were already gone. They had moved further out, to Flatbush, to Long Island. The buildings now held 3 or 4 immigrant working-class households where they had once held one. Anna Reichert's building had a German family in the basement, the Reicherts on the parlor floor, Anna alone since her husband's death, an Irish family on the 2nd floor, and 3 Italian boarders in the attic. Inside, on a July night, that arrangement produced an interior temperature that the New York Department of Health later measured on similar buildings in similar neighborhoods. At 120 degrees Fahrenheit, The stoop was an emergency exit. Anna Reichert keeps a tin cup of water beside her on the step. She has been refilling it from the stoop pump on the corner. The Brownstones on this block have indoor plumbing, but the pressure drops in summer and the water runs warm, and the cup has been filled 6 times since dinner. Her grandson Albert, who is 11, lies on the step below her, on his back, hands behind his head. His mother, Anna's daughter, is at her own kitchen chair job, scrubbing the floors of the Macy's department store at Herald Square in Manhattan, where the night cleaning crew comes on at 10 and works until 6 in the morning. Albert sleeps on his grandmother's stoop most nights in summer. The walk back to his mother's apartment in Williamsburg is too far when she works the night shift. Albert is half asleep, but not quite. His grandmother is talking to Mrs. McCarthy across the alleyway gap between buildings, and the conversation is about which doctor on Throop Avenue will see a child for $50. Mrs. McCarthy's youngest has had a fever for 3 days. Anna had this same conversation with her own daughter 8 years ago when Albert was a baby with the same fever, and she remembers the doctor's name. She passes it across. The transmission of medical information across a darkened alley between 2 stoops, between 2 women in their 60s speaking different first languages, in 1910 Brooklyn, is the kind of exchange that historians today reconstruct from oral histories collected 40 and 50 years later. The Brooklyn Historical Society's Oral History Archive, now part of the Center for Brooklyn History at Brooklyn Public Library, contains hundreds of these exchanges, sometimes named, mostly not. The information network of the Brownstone block in 1910 is not a metaphor. It is a system. Every neighborhood has one. It runs every summer night from May through September. It carries job openings, apartment vacancies, the names of doctors who will accept partial payment, the schedules of pushcart vendors who give credit, the address of the new Union Hall that the longshoremen on the docks have been talking about. It runs because the alternative, formal institutional information, is closed to the people on these stoops. Most of them do not have telephones. Many of them have limited English. The labor exchange downtown will not help them. The settlement house on Atlantic Avenue is helpful but slow. The stoop network is fast and free, and on a hot July night it is the only system available. It also runs on women. The men on this block, on this night, are also outside. Some on the stoops, some in the bars on Throop Avenue, some on the sidewalks below their wives, but the operators of the information network are the women on the top steps. Anna Reichert is one. Mrs. McCarthy is another. Down the block, the matriarch of the Salerno-born Bonelli family, who has lived on this street for 9 years and is fluent in 3 Southern Italian dialects and functional English, is another. These women know everything about the block. They know which household just took in a boarder and is therefore short on space. They know whose husband lost work at the Brooklyn Navy Yard last week. They know which apartment is going to come open at the end of August. They know the back of the classified pages information that the New York newspapers do not print and the building and loan associations do not share. They know it because they have been sitting on these top steps every summer night for years and watching and listening and remembering. The information they hold is what keeps their families alive in a city that is not built to help them. Albert on the lower step has fallen asleep. His grandmother lays a folded handkerchief over his face to keep flies off. She continues her conversation with Mrs. McCarthy. The temperature is still 91 degrees on the stone. It will not drop below 85 before the sun comes up. The stoops fill again the next night. The system runs. To understand why these stoops exist at all, you have to walk back 30 years. Brooklyn, between 1880 and 1900, was the fastest growing city in the United States. The population went from 396,000 to over 1,100,000 in 20 years. To house that many people, speculative developers, small operations of 2 to 10 investors usually, bought up cheap lots in the borough's expanding grid and built row houses by pattern book. The Brooklyn County Clerk's Office still holds the original building permits. The architects of record are obscure men. The contractors were firms like Walker and Sons or Mason and Holt or any of 36 builders the Brooklyn Eagle listed in its classified pages. The crews were Irish bricklayers, Italian laborers, German ironworkers, Polish and Jewish Finnish carpenters. The skilled trades earned $3 a day. The unskilled earned $1.25. None of them could afford to live in the buildings they built. The stoop itself came from the Dutch. The word Stoop, brought by 17th century settlers of New Amsterdam, where land sat inches above water and a raised entrance kept floods out of foundations. The Dutch were gone by 1880. The water level reasoning was gone, but the developers kept the stoop because it had been repurposed for a problem the original Dutch builders had not been thinking about. The stoop separated, on a single facade, 2 different doors, one for the family, one for the cook, the laundress, the ice delivery man, the coal carrier. The upper door at the top of 10 carved steps. The lower door 6 feet beneath it, set into the base of the building, almost hidden under the stoop above. In 1880, the architecture worked. The middle-class Anglo family in the parlor used the upper door. Their servant, usually a recent Irish immigrant woman, paid $8 a month plus room and board in the basement, used the lower one. By 1910, when Anna Reichert was sitting on the top step, the architecture had stopped working the way it was designed to. There was no servant downstairs. There was a German family in the basement paying their own rent, using their own door, eating their own dinner on the same hot summer nights. The upper door and the lower door had become, in practice, the front doors of 2 different working-class households. The class line that the architecture was built to enforce had moved up, not down. The whole building was working class now. The stoop, however, did not change. The stone steps still rose 10 feet from the sidewalk to the parlor door. The cast iron railings still curled in the same floral pattern they had been forged in at the foundries in Philadelphia and New Jersey in 1885. The carved Newark sandstone still flaked at the edges, 25 years after it was set, exactly the way the developers had known it would. What had changed was who used the stoop and how. By 1910, a piece of architecture that had been built to perform middle-class respectability had been repurposed by working-class immigrant families as the largest semi-public living room in the Western world. The stoop became the porch they could not afford, the sidewalk they could not avoid, the cooling system the building did not provide, the information network the city did not run for them. The developers who built these blocks would not have recognized what their buildings became. The buildings did not care. The buildings worked anyway. Carroll Street, Brooklyn, July 1948, 8:30 in the evening. The block runs from Smith Street to Court Street, and it does not look like McDonough Street. The Brownstones here have deep front gardens, 20 feet of yard between the sidewalk and the stoop, enclosed by iron fences 4 feet high with gates at the sidewalk. The original 1880s developers had built these blocks on slightly larger lots, anticipating the higher-end Italianate buyer who never quite arrived in numbers, and the unintended consequence, 65 years later, is that Carroll Gardens looks more like a village than a Brooklyn neighborhood. The gardens are full of tomato plants in July 1948, fig trees in the rear corners, laundry strung from line to line, folding chairs set out on the brick paths. The Italian families on this block have lived here for 40 years. The Irish presence, the original Catholic parish of St. Stephen, which had drawn the first wave of Carroll Gardens settlers in the 1860s, has receded. The new dominant population since the 1910s is Sicilian and Southern Italian, and by 1948 well into its 3rd generation. Children born here in 1948 will have grandparents born in Palermo and great-grandparents born in Salerno. The names on the buildings, when there are nameplates, are Carbone, Esposito, Bonelli, Vitale. On a July evening in 1948, the entire block is outside. The format is different from McDonough Street 38 years earlier. There, the stoop was the social platform. Here, the stoop is one part of a larger outdoor system. The garden in front of the stoop itself, the sidewalk beyond the gate, all three function as one extended living room. A family's territory begins at the back of its house and continues to the curb of Carroll Street. On a hot night, the family occupies all of it. On the stoop of one building between Smith and Court, an old Italian woman sits on the highest step in the standard widow's costume. Black dress, black headscarf, black stockings, even in July. Her name is Filomena Camisa. She is 78 years old. She came to Brooklyn from a village outside Palermo in 1899, married Domenico Camisa in 1901, raised 4 children in this same building between 1902 and 1925, and watched her husband die in 1939. She has sat on this exact step every July evening for 46 years. The wood of the railing under her left hand has been polished by her hand. Below her, on the middle steps, 2 of her grown sons are smoking and talking. Salvatore is a longshoreman at the Red Hook docks, 3 blocks south. Joseph drives a delivery truck for an Italian-American grocery wholesaler in Bensonhurst. They are talking about a strike vote on the docks, due next Tuesday. The conversation is in Italian mostly, with English words slipping in when they refer to American institutions, the union, the local, the contract. The strike vote will pass. 2 of the men on this block will be on the picket line a week from now. On the lower steps and the brick path leading to the gate, 3 teenage girls sit close together, hair set in pin curls under cotton scarves, dresses pressed earlier in the afternoon. They are watching the sidewalk. They are listening for the sound of a particular boy on a particular bicycle who is supposed to come down Carroll Street on his way home from a shift at a Smith Street pizzeria. The girl's grandmother, Filomena, can see them from the top step. The boy on the bicycle knows this. The system is self-regulating. In the garden, 6 small children are running between the tomato plants and the fig tree, playing a chase game whose rules are unclear to anyone over the age of 9. Their mothers have set up 2 folding card tables next to the gate and are eating a late dinner: pasta, bread, a green salad, a bottle of homemade red wine, and 1 bottle of Coca-Cola for the children. Plates of food are passed across the iron fence to the family next door. A bowl of figs goes the other way. The smell on Carroll Street on a July evening in 1948 is olive oil and tomato sauce and basil from 20 kitchens layered over the smell of warm pavement. There's a faint note of fish from the docks 2 streets over when the wind shifts. From a radio sitting on a windowsill 3 buildings down, an Italian-language program from WHOM is playing folk songs from Calabria, and from another radio across the street, the Brooklyn Dodgers game at Ebbets Field is on. The Dodgers are playing the Cardinals tonight. Stan Musial is at the plate in the 8th. The announcer is Red Barber. The 2 radios bleed into each other on the warm air. This block is not the Lower East Side. The density is not extreme. The poverty is not extreme. Most of the men on this block work at the docks, on trucks, in shops, in factories. Most of the families have been on this same street for 30 or 40 years. Most of the buildings are owned, or close to owned, by the families that occupy them. Carroll Gardens in 1948 is one of the few stretches of New York City where working-class Italian immigrants and their American-born children have managed to put down roots that look, from a distance, like the kind of stability the country promised them. But the heat is still 90 degrees. The interiors of these houses are still unbearable. The men still work 12-hour shifts when the docks are busy. The women still spend most of the day in kitchens that double the outdoor temperature, and so on a Tuesday night in July 1948, the block is outside. A photographer named Andreas Feininger, working for Life magazine, will pass through Carroll Gardens later this same summer and shoot a picture that will become, without anyone in 1948 understanding this, one of the iconic photographs of mid-century Brooklyn. 3 Italian women in house dresses sitting on a stoop, talking, children at their feet, a laundry line behind them. The photograph will be published in Life in October 1948 with a caption about the warmth of Brooklyn neighborhood life. The caption will not mention that the women had been outside since 6 o'clock because the kitchens behind them were 110 degrees and would not cool below 95 until 2 in the morning. The photograph will not mention that the laundry on the line had been hand-washed in a basin in the basement in water heated on a coal stove because the building had no hot water heater. The photograph will not mention that Filomena Camisa, who is not in Feininger's photograph but is sitting on a stoop 100 feet away, would tell you, if you sat with her on the steps and asked, that the only summers she could remember being comfortable were the 4 summers between 1899 and 1903, when she was a young woman in a Sicilian village by the sea and the wind came off the water at sundown. The block is romantic only because the alternative, staying inside, is impossible. By 11:30 on this Tuesday night, most of the children have been carried inside. Filomena's daughter-in-law has cleared the card tables. The teenage girls have gone back inside the building where the ceiling fans on the parlor floor are running and the front windows are wedged open and the air is moving slightly, finally, after 9 straight hours of stillness. Filomena stays on her top step until midnight. Her sons go to bed. Her daughter-in-law brings her one more glass of cold water at 11:45. Filomena nods. She drinks it. She stays. The block falls quiet around her, one stoop at a time. The radios go off. The conversations end. By 12:30, only she is still out. A small black-clad shape on the highest step of one of 40 buildings, watching Carroll Street empty out. She has been doing this for 46 summers. She will do it for 9 more. Now, go back to McDonough Street. It is 1940, the same block as Anna Reichert's stoop, the same building. Anna Reichert herself died in 1923. Her daughter, Albert's mother, sold the building during the Depression to a black family, a postal worker named James Holloway and his wife Lillian, who had moved north from Charleston, South Carolina in 1925 as part of what historians later named the Great Migration. The Holloways are typical of who is buying brownstones in Bedford-Stuyvesant in the late 1930s and early 1940s. The neighborhood, which had been substantially Jewish and Irish in 1910, has been transformed by 2 simultaneous migrations: the move of Jewish and Irish families out to Flatbush, Brownsville, Queens, and the suburbs, and the arrival of black families from the American South, Charleston, Atlanta, Birmingham, Memphis, and Caribbean families from Barbados, Jamaica, and Trinidad. The new INDA train, which began running through Bedford-Stuyvesant in 1936, made the neighborhood accessible from Harlem and Manhattan, and Harlem itself was overcrowded. Mortgage discrimination shaped what the Holloways could buy and how. The Federal Housing Administration, created in 1934, had instructed mortgage insurers to consider the racial composition of a neighborhood when assessing loan risk, and Bedford-Stuyvesant by the late 1930s had been graded by the Home Owners Loan Corporation as a declining area. James Holloway's mortgage, which he obtained through a small black-owned savings and loan in Sa'antim, Harlem, rather than through a federally insured lender, carried an interest rate 2.5 points higher than what a white buyer on the same block would have paid. The down payment was 30% rather than the 10% the FHA was offering on suburban purchases. The Holloways paid it. They also took in 2 Caribbean boarders to help cover the mortgage. One a young man from Bridgetown, Barbados, who had come to New York 3 years earlier and worked as a porter at Penn Station, the other a woman from Kingston, Jamaica, who worked as a nursemaid for a wealthy Manhattan family. On a summer night in 1940, the Holloways' stoop has 6 adults on it. James and Lillian and the two boarders, plus James's brother who is up from Charleston for 2 weeks, plus a woman named Miss Ada from down the block, a widow, retired school teacher, who walks over after supper most evenings to sit and talk. The conversation, on this stoop, on this night in 1940, is a different conversation from Anna Reichert's in 1910. The men talk about jobs, but the jobs have a specific ceiling: the post office, the railroad, the docks, the longshoremen's union, which is finally beginning to admit black workers in some locals after years of exclusion, the merchant marine. They talk about the war in Europe, which America is not yet in, and what it will mean if black men are drafted into a segregated military, which they will be when America enters the war the next year. They talk about the church, Concord Baptist Church on Marcy Avenue, where the Holloways are members, and where Reverend Adam Clayton Powell Jr. has spoken from the pulpit twice this year while visiting from Harlem. They talk about the police. 2 weeks earlier, on a corner 3 blocks from this stoop, the New York City Police Department had broken up a gathering of black teenagers who were sitting on a stoop telling jokes. The officer cited loitering. The same officer had walked past a similar gathering of white teenagers 2 blocks west 10 minutes earlier and had not stopped. James Holloway was not at either gathering. He heard about both before he got home from his shift at the post office on Saturday afternoon. The information network of the block carried the news in roughly 45 minutes. What this means for the Holloways on their own stoop on this hot July night is that they sit a little differently from how Anna Reichert sat in 1910. They do not stay out as late. They are quieter when the patrol car turns onto McDonough from Tompkins Avenue. The teenage children of 2 families on this block have been told, by their mothers, on this stoop, in conversations that did not happen in 1910, when to go inside, when to walk home a different way, what to say if a police officer asks where they are going. The stoop is still the social center of the block. It is also now a calculation. This is the part of the Brownstone story that the architecture cannot tell you. The stones are the same. The carved Newark sandstone facade has held up for 55 years. The cast iron railing still curls in the same floral pattern. Anna Reichert's footprint is in the same step where Lillian Holloway is now sitting 30 years later holding a glass of iced tea. The building does not know the difference, but the experience of sitting on the top step at 11 o'clock on a summer night in 1940, looking down McDonough Street at the same block and the same buildings and the same gas lamps that Anna Reichert looked at in 1910, is not the same experience. The difference is what the Holloways carry inside themselves while they sit there, what they listen for in the distance, what conversation goes silent when a stranger turns onto the block. The 1927 National Urban League Survey of Brooklyn Housing, published 13 years before the Holloways bought their building, had found black renters paying between 20% and 40% more per room than white renters in comparable buildings just blocks away. The market knew that one group of tenants had options and the other group did not. By 1940, the Holloways were owners, which had been the goal, but the geography that had set the rent had set the mortgage too. Lillian sips her tea. She looks across the street at the building where, 20 years ago, Anna Reichert's daughter had still lived. A young black couple lives there now. Their porch light is off. Their stoop is empty. The block grows quiet. The Holloways go inside at 11. The next morning, James walks to the post office at 5:30 in his uniform, and the sun is already coming up. It is 1970. The same block, the same building. The Holloway's grandson, James Holloway III, lives in the parlor floor apartment now. James and Lillian both died in the early 1960s. Their son, James Jr., sold the building to his own son for a token sum in 1968, when the city was beginning to come apart and the buildings on McDonough were beginning to be hard to give away. The brownstone facade in 1970 is not the brownstone facade of 1885. 65 years of New York winters and summers have done what the developers of the 1880s knew the soft Newark sandstone would do. The surface has spalled, layer by layer, until the carved details have rounded off and the facade looks weathered in a way that the 1885 brochures had promised it would not. The cast iron railing is rusted in 3 places. The lower service door beneath the stoop has been painted over so many times that the paint itself is the door's main structural element. The block in 1970 is in a fight. Bedford-Stuyvesant in 1970 is approximately 85% black, up from 55% in 1950. The neighborhood has been redlined by every major mortgage insurer in the United States since 1934. The buildings on these blocks have been deferred maintenance properties for a generation. Many have been subdivided into single-room occupancy units by absentee landlords. Some have been abandoned. A few, by the spring of 1970, have burned. The fires are not always accidents. The journalist Joe Conason will document this 5 years from now in the Village Voice, but in the summer of 1970, the residents of McDonough Street already know. James Holloway III is 28 years old. He works for the New York City Department of Sanitation. He is married. He has a 4-year-old daughter named Crystal. On a hot July night in 1970, he sits on the same stoop where his grandmother Lillian sat in 1940 and his great step-predecessor Anna Reichert sat in 1910. He's wearing a sleeveless T-shirt and shorts. He is holding a transistor radio tuned to WLIB, the black-owned R&B and news station. The radio is playing a Marvin Gaye record. What's going on? Just released. The lyrics ask a question that, sitting on this stoop, on this block, on this night, James does not need translated. His daughter Crystal plays on the lower step with 2 other children from the block. The stoop is still functioning as a stoop. It is still cooler outside than inside. The information network is still running. Crystal's mother knows which doctors on Lewis Avenue will see black patients on a sliding scale, knows which landlord on the corner is harassing his tenants this month, knows which bodega on Throop is overcharging, and the network still runs through the women on the top steps. James's wife is one of them now. The teenagers on the lower steps still flirt and wait for the evening to cool down. What is different in 1970 is what is missing from the block. 3 buildings down from James on the south side of McDonough, there is a vacant lot where a brownstone used to be. The building burned in November 1968. The city took it for back taxes and demolished it the next year. Nobody has built anything in the lot. Crystal and her friends have been told not to play in it because there is broken glass and rusted metal. They play in it anyway, but only during the day. 2 buildings west, there is another vacant lot where a brownstone used to be. The building burned in March 1969. Across the street, 2 doors east of where Anna Reichert's daughter lived in 1923, a brownstone is boarded up. The owner left it 3 years ago. The city has not yet taken it. The boards on the windows have been pried off twice and replaced once. Time equals 600 milliseconds / greater than. These vacant lots and boarded buildings are scattered across McDonough Street the way missing teeth are scattered across a face. The block is no longer a continuous wall of brownstones, no longer a continuous row of stoops. The social technology of the block, the information network, the multi-stoop visibility, the watching grandmothers on the top steps depends on the block being a wall. When the wall breaks, the system gets harder to run. James Holloway III knows this. His grandmother Lillian, in conversations he barely remembers from when he was a small child, had told him about how the block worked when she was raising his father. She had told him how everyone knew everyone, how the women on the top steps had eyes on every child on the block, how if he or his cousins got into trouble at the corner of Throop, somebody's grandmother would tell his grandmother before he made it home. That system, James understands at 28, in the summer of 1970, sitting on his stoop, is not gone. It is degraded. The radio plays. Crystal laughs at something one of the other children has said. James watches the empty lot down the block, where someone has lit a small fire in a metal can, and 3 teenagers are standing around it talking. James knows 2 of them by name. The third is new on the block. The fire is a problem he will think about tomorrow. Tonight, the temperature on the stoop is 86 and slowly falling. Tonight, his daughter is on the step below him. Safe. He stays out until midnight. It is July 17th, 2024. The same block, the same building, the same stoop. The brownstone has been restored, twice actually, once in the early 1990s by a black professional couple who bought it from James Holloway III in 1987, and again in 2018 by the current owners, a young white couple, both technology workers, who paid $3,800,000 for it. The carved Newark sandstone has been resurfaced by a specialty contractor approved by the Brooklyn Landmarks Preservation Commission. The cast iron railing has been stripped, primed, and repainted in a glossy black that matches the original 1880s color found in chemical analysis of paint chips at the Brooklyn Historical Society. The stoop has been repointed with new mortar that matches the original Portland cement formula. The lower service door, the one that opens onto the basement apartment, has been replaced with a hand-built reproduction of an 1887 carpenter's pattern, costing the new owners $11,000. The building, in 2024, looks more like 1885 than it did in 1985. It is 8:30 in the evening. The temperature has dropped from a high of 93 degrees to 84. The stoop is cool to the touch. The young couple who own the building are not on the stoop. They are on the roof deck, installed by the previous owners in 2009, accessed by a back staircase that did not exist in any version of the building before 2007. The wife is a software engineer. The husband is a pediatrician at NYU Langone. They are drinking white wine and watching the sunset over the Manhattan skyline. They have a baby asleep upstairs. They are, by every measurable standard, doing well in the city. They are not on the stoop because they have not figured out the stoop. The wife grew up in Westchester. The husband grew up in Connecticut. The stoop, to them, is the most beautiful feature of the building they have purchased. The Street Easy listing they bought from had described it in 56 words and had used the phrase original 1887 stoop, but it is not a place they have yet lived. They sat on it 3 times in the first week after they moved in October 2018. Their neighbors had nodded at them politely from the sidewalk. They had nodded back. The next time they wanted to be outside, they went up to the roof. 3 doors down, on the south side of McDonough, between Tompkins and Throop, a woman named Linda Holloway sits on the top step of her stoop. Linda is 69 years old. She is the daughter of Crystal Holloway and the granddaughter of James Holloway III. She has lived in this building since 1996, when her grandfather sold it to her father at a family discount. Her father died in 2014. Her mother died in 2019. Linda owns the building outright now. The building is worth, by current Street Easy comparables, $3,700,000. She is not selling. Linda waves at a young couple walking a dog past her gate. They wave back. She does not know their names. They moved onto the block 3 years ago. The woman on the corner who used to know everyone's name, Mrs. Carter, who lived at the Reichert/Holloway building, the one the white tech couple now owns, moved to Atlanta in 2017 to live with her daughter. Mrs. Carter had been on this block since 1972. She had known Linda's grandparents. She had known the names of every child who played on McDonough between Tompkins and Throop from approximately 1972 to 2016. Nobody runs the information network on McDonough Street anymore. There are still stoops. There are still people on them. There are still teenagers on the lower steps and grandmothers on the top steps and children playing on the sidewalk. but the people on the top steps now do not know the names of the people in the buildings 2 doors down. The information that used to travel, which doctor will see your child, which landlord is fair, which apartment is going to come open next month, has moved to the Nextdoor app. Nextdoor sorts by zip code and length of residency. Linda is on Nextdoor. She does not post, she watches the block. Down the corner, 3 teenagers are sitting on the stoop of an apartment building that did not exist in 1885. It is a 6-story 1920s building, brick, with a small concrete stoop and no carved cornice. The teenagers are black, and they are laughing, and one of them has a Bluetooth speaker. The block is quiet. The teenagers are quiet enough that nobody complains. Linda, watching them from her own stoop, recognizes one of them. He is the grandson of a woman she went to elementary school with. He waves at her. She waves back. A police car turns onto McDonough from Tompkins Avenue. It rolls slowly past the 3 teenagers. It does not stop. It rolls past Linda's stoop. It does not stop. It turns onto Throop and disappears. Linda watches. The teenagers go back to laughing. The Bluetooth speaker plays a song Linda does not recognize. The young white couple on the roof deck of the building 3 doors down does not see any of this. They are facing west, toward Manhattan. The sun is setting behind the Empire State Building. The wife is taking a photograph on her phone. Linda Holloway is 69 years old. Her great-great step-predecessor, Anna Reichert, sat on a stoop 2 doors up from this one in 1910 and watched her grandson sleep on the lower step. Lillian Holloway sat on this exact stoop in 1940 and counted what time the patrol car came down the block. James Holloway III sat on this same stoop in 1970 and watched a small fire burn in a metal can in an empty lot 3 buildings down. Linda is sitting on this same stoop in 2024 and watching 3 teenagers laugh at a joke she cannot quite hear. The stoop has held all of them. The carved Newark sandstone is 137 years old. The Irish bricklayers who set it are 140 years dead. The building behind Linda is owned by the great-granddaughter of a Charleston postal worker who paid 2.5 points above the going rate to buy it in 1939. The market value of the stoop in 2024 exceeds the entire annual budget of the public elementary school 3 blocks east, where Linda taught for 31 years before she retired. The stoop holds the whole sequence in stone. The stone does not say which part is the part you are supposed to remember. Linda sits on the top step until 11. The block falls quiet around her. The teenagers on the corner go inside. The young couple on the roof deck come down. The lights in the Brownstones come on, 1 window at a time. By midnight, only Linda is still out, a small figure on a high step on a Tuesday night. Watching McDonough Street, knowing every door on the block from the inside, watching what stays and what doesn't. The stoop holds. What it holds is no longer one thing.